The year is 1945. The Korean Peninsula looks like this. No north or south, just one single Korea. The Japanese had been driven out of the country, so someone had to take charge. The US and Soviet Union jumped at the chance. They carved up the country. The Soviets would control the north, the US would control the south. In the middle was this line, the 38th parallel. Even today, it divides North and South Korea. But that was not the original plan. The plan was to leave the peninsula, to let the Koreans figure things out. Unfortunately, that never happened. The Cold War came in between, the North became communist, the South became anti-communist. But still one question remained. Who is the real Korea? The North decided to fight it out. They sent around 75,000 soldiers to invade the South, enter the United States. They did what they do best. They intervened. And that's how the Korean War broke out, the first conflict of the Cold War. You may have heard the story. But did you know that India played a key role in this war? New Delhi juggled many hats: messenger, peace broker, negotiator, and prisoner of war custodian. It's a forgotten story of how a young democracy tried to prevent World War III. The date is October 2nd, 1950. American soldiers are on the march. They're closing in on the 38th parallel. Thousands of kilometers away in Beijing, the communists are worried. What if the war spills over? Around midnight, the Indian ambassador gets a summon. Premier Zhou Enlai wanted to meet. At this meeting, the ambassador got a message. It wasn't for India, though. The message was for the US and Britain. If American troops cross the 38th parallel, China will intervene. That was the message. Or come to think of it, the warning. The Indian ambassador noted it. At around 1:30 a.m., he cabled it to then Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru. Now you may be thinking, why go to all this trouble? Why not tell the Americans directly? Because they had no ambassadors. The US did not recognize the communist regime in Beijing. For them, the regime was in Taiwan. So no diplomatic channels with Beijing existed. Hence the message via India. Nehru sent this message to the US and Britain. They did not take it seriously. The Americans thought it was communist propaganda or maybe panic mongering from India. Either way, they ignored it. Big mistake. Weeks later, China entered the battlefield. It was now a much bigger war. South Korea and the US on one side, North Korea and China on the other.
I point my finger at these representatives of the Chinese communist regime, and I ask, why do they come here with unclean hands? I ask again, why does this group come here with hands that drip with blood? The blood of the United Nations troops, the blood of the Korean people.
In New Delhi, Nehru was angry and worried. Angry because the Americans ignored him. Worried because the war was escalating. India had all sorts of concerns. What if the Soviet Union entered the battle? What if other Asian countries were dragged in? So India decided to play peacemaker. Meanwhile, in New York, a diplomatic battle was unfolding, here at the United Nations.
It is also our duty to look beyond the conflict and to find means whereby peace and unity can be restored in Korea. In our view, there must no longer be South Koreans and North Koreans, but just Koreans who must be encouraged to work together to rebuild their country with the advice and the help and the support of the United Nations.
When the war broke out, the Security Council passed 3 resolutions. First, the North Koreans should withdraw. India voted in favor. Second, give assistance to South Korea. Again, India voted in favor. Third, give America full command over the UN forces. India abstained. How did these resolutions get passed? Because the Soviet Union was not there. It was boycotting the UNSC. At that time, Taiwan still held China's seat on the council, so Stalin said, we won't participate. India never sent fighting troops to Korea, but it deployed the 60th Parachute Field Ambulance, and they did fantastic work. They helped around 200,000 wounded soldiers, also conducted more than 2,300 surgeries. Many Korean veterans had great things to say about India. Months later, Soviet Union returned to the UNSC. So no more resolutions. Stalin's delegation vetoed everything. What did the Americans do? Well, they shifted to the General Assembly. They created a special committee for ceasefire. It had 3 members, including India. The General Assembly approved their proposals, but China did not. Then in 1951, the General Assembly voted to sanction China. It seemed like a dead end, as if no one wanted peace. US President Harry Truman threatened to use nuclear bombs in Korea. Irresponsible, yes, but listen to what Mao Zedong said in response. Mao said, China has a population of 600 million. Even if half of them are killed, we have 300 million left. Slow claps for China's greatest statesman. As the war escalated, India almost gave up. Then in 1952, there was hope again. It had nothing to do with mature leadership, though. It's just that no one was winning, so both sides decided to give peace a shot. They met in a village called Panmunjom near the border. Fun fact, if North and South Korea ever want to talk, they still go to this village. It's also where Donald Trump met Kim Jong-un. Anyway, in 1952, there was an agreement on most issues, except one, prisoners of war. There were 170,000 prisoners in UN custody. America said, give them a choice. Let them decide if they want to return home. China disagreed. It wanted a full exchange. That's when India got cracking again. It appointed a special envoy to find a solution. V.K. Krishna Menon. His speciality? No one liked him. Neither the West nor the communists. Menon's proposal was this: let's create a special commission to handle the prisoners. With 5 members, prisoners who wanted to return could do so. Those who did not would be in UN custody. It was a logical and fair proposal. But this was the Cold War. Logic wasn't exactly in much demand. The General Assembly approved the plan, the Soviets did not. Diplomacy failed, the fighting resumed. More innocent people died. Thousands were injured and displaced. Then in 1953, common sense prevailed. North and South Korea signed an armistice. But what about the prisoners? A new version of Krishna Menon's plan was adopted. A new committee was set up. India was appointed chair. It was a mammoth task. Many countries questioned India's capacity. They doubted whether India could pull it off. Remember, this was 1953. India had been free for just 6 years. So to handle the repatriation of 170,000 prisoners was a big task. And hanging in the balance was world peace. No pressure, I guess. India sent 5 contingents to protect the prisoners of war. 4 left on a ship from Chennai, 1 was airlifted from Kolkata. The repatriation committee was headed by this man, Lieutenant General K.S. Thimayya, a legend of the Indian Army, still among the best officers we've ever produced. The soldiers deployed in Korea had clear orders: don't engage, don't use force, don't take sides. And from all accounts, the soldiers did great. The Indian soldiers. They were based on the southern side of the demilitarized zone. The area was called Hindnagar. So the troops were in place, the camp was set, and the orders were clear. Now to the tough part, getting 170,000 prisoners home. You would think it's easy. After all, who wouldn't want to go home after a war? Well, think again. Around 22,000 prisoners did not want to return. India got their custody. Can you imagine the situation? Looking after 22,000 prisoners of war in a foreign land. It wasn't easy. Sometimes the prisoners acted out. One incident in November 1953 stands out. A few prisoners took Indian soldiers hostage. General Thimayya had to intervene himself. It tells you how dangerous the job was. Nonetheless, the Indian soldiers motored on. They handed over the prisoners to various groups and countries. Finally, just 88 remain. They just won't go home. Guess what India did? Took them along. Those 88 prisoners returned to India with our soldiers, 12 Chinese, 74 North Koreans, 2 South Koreans. Where are they now? Well, many have left India to live in other countries. Some moved to Germany, others to Latin America, but a few did stay back. Unfortunately, their stories have not been documented. Thus ended a pretty intense conflict of the 20th century. A young India successfully came out on top. What do the experiences of 1950 teach us? The importance of diplomacy, especially for India. We had no strategic interest or influence in Korea, yet we helped. In its own little way, India pushed for peace, and that legacy is still alive. Take Ukraine, for example. India may not trumpet its plans like China. That doesn't mean India doesn't care. New Delhi has always believed in quiet diplomacy. The key is to continue that. India's neutrality isn't just a self-serving policy. It can be a tool for peacemaking. The Korean experience confirms that. As for Seoul and Pyongyang, there is much to learn. They signed a ceasefire in July 1953. 7 decades later, there is no peace deal. North Korea has become a nuclear rogue state. They've fired over 23 projectiles this year so far. And the dreams of a unified Korea look distant. But like India showed in 1950, don't give up. Politics and diplomacy are all about trying. Success is secondary.